Before we get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support over the years. It is greatly appreciated. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. We are making our way through the player cards in the Feast of Hemlock Vale Investigator expansion. This is part 1 of our look at the rogue cards in the box. We are going to start off with Bianca de Katz. She's a 2-cost asset with an agility skill icon, ally, criminal, and socialite trait. Limit 1 per deck, uses 10 resources. As an action, you can exhaust Bianca de Katz and parlay. Move X resources from Bianca de Katz to your resource pool. X cannot be more than 5. Test agility X. If you fail, remember you owe Bianca X resources. Then search your bonded cards for the Bianca de Katz enemy and spawn her at your location. Remove this card from the game. She has 2 health and 1 sanity and takes up an ally slot. So if you piss off Bianca, she comes back as a weakness. She has 3 fight, 3 health, and 3 evade. Humanoid, criminal, and socialite. Bonded to Bianca de Katz. Hunter. Prey is bearer only. As an action, if you owe Bianca X resources, spend X resources. Parlay, add Bianca de Katz to the victory display. Forced, when Bianca de Katz leaves play, except by the above ability, shuffle her into your deck. And she has victory 0 and will hit you for 2 damage. Thoughts on Bianca?
Hi, it's Veronica once more because they keep dragging me back in. They wanted to start talking about the rogue cards and they wanted to say that they were bad, so I was like, nope, I'm coming back.
Just
No,
one of them. Just one.
We will see if we get to that card. We won't get to it in this video, but stay tuned. I have some opinions TM about rogue cards. First thing, I actually thought this was kind of clever, because the action ability on her weakness side has a requirement if you owe Bianca X resources, which at first I was like, how do you ever get this card into play? And that condition isn't met, which confused me. But somebody actually pointed out that no, it is specific to the investigator who owes Bianca X resources. So the person who put the ally into their deck is the only one who can owe Bianca the resources, and this is the only one. Nobody else can pay your debts, basically. Is the thing, which is actually, I think, a neat little balancing thing. I don't know if it needs to be there, and I think that's kind of where I am with this entire card, which is I don't know if it needs to be here, but it's kind of neat. So I am a massive fan of Gregory Gry. I think Gregory Gry is, I don't know if it's still underrated. I don't know how highly he is rated currently, but I think he's one of the best level 0 allies in Rogue, no question. And I don't think Bianca is particularly competitive for his slot, because having to spend an action to move resources, you're already out. Gregory just gives you
and you have to exhaust Bianca.
Yeah, two resources to play, gain 8 resources potentially is nice, even over 2 actions. Or 3 actions, I guess, if you're doing it optimally, but that requires passing several tests. Now, they are parlay tests. There are ways to shenanigans that. Don't worry, fine clothes. We're only going to mention that card about 1 billion times in the next couple of videos. Listen, they made a parlay investigator. We could just, can we just put fine clothes in the corner and then, yes, we know about fine clothes, and then we don't have to mention it every single time? Because the thing is, if you spend an action to take 2 resources, it's why aren't you just playing a better econ card? 3 resources, still 4 resources, sure. 5 resources, this is actually kind of nice. It's 3 actions to gain 8, while also getting a little bit of soak. But a difficulty 3 test is not something that I think you can do effortlessly, and that is assuming you find the fine clothes before you start activating this. The problem that I have with it is that the people I've played with have played Alessandra. I've not managed to play her myself a lot, and they want to play this card because it says the word parlay on it. But my experience has been that Alessandra isn't short on good parlay cards. You can just play way better parlay cards. So this card is kind of That being said, Alessandra decks sometimes want more enemies, so failing the test could be nice. You also, importantly, get the money even if you fail the test. So if you're like, F it, I just want 5 resources right now, I don't care what the consequences are, that is kind of nice. I don't necessarily think that you have to be fighting, if you want to play 3 allies in your level 0 deck, which I do occasionally do, I think Gregory, Bianca, or if you're doing the Underworld support, is it Underworld support? That's the 1 card per deck, right?
You know what you mean.
Then this is, I think it's worse Gregory in a lot of ways, but I don't think it's bad. It's like it's not an unplayable card. It's just the other thing is like she has 2 health and 1 sanity, and Gregory has 1 health and 2 sanity. And in rogues, I tend to worry about my sanity a lot more, and so like it's just a little bit worse. But that doesn't make it a bad card. It's just like, yeah, is this taking the slot? No, but maybe there's space anyway. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Sorry, I'm a bit long-winded.
No, I actually agree with a lot of that. Well, one thing I will say is having studied Alessandra kind of extensively and played a bunch of her, there is one fundamental problem with Alessandra, especially at lower player counts, and that is in order for Alessandra's ability to do anything, you have to have an enemy on the board and in your spot. That's not always going to happen, especially in like a solo situation. You might have to wait a few turns to get enemies on the board, unless you're going to like spawn more of them. You know, with like kicking the hornet's nest or something.
Yeah.
Bianca de Katz, her ability is one of the few parlays that does not require an enemy on them, which is nice by itself. Okay, so you could do stuff that involves parlaying. You could snitch. You could do things like your snitches, and you could trigger other effects that trigger off of parlays. You can do it with a card from your deck that doesn't, without there being an enemy there. And then, of course, there's the trick where, like, sometimes you do want enemies on the board, because remember, you can beguile the enemy version, after you get it into play. So if you think of it like almost like a slower resource generator version of, like, kicking the hornet's nest, there might be something there if you think of it that way. Just like as a beguile generator.
I want to point out that kicking the hornet's nest does already generate resources, but yes, you are correct.
Yeah. I mean, there are other reasons to play kicking the hornet's nest, right? Like, and I kind of like it. But that being said, like when you're playing solo, like you may not necessarily if you feel like you might get overwhelmed by enemies already, you may not want to kick the hornet's nest and get extra ones. At least with Bianca, you get like a choice of like when you're spawning it. And yeah, it's kind of an interesting one. I feel like it's not like overwhelming.
You get that choice until you draw the autofill for the first time, and then it's not a choice. I feel
like Bianca is like almost there. I don't know how I would improve her though. That's kind of the problem.
Oh, I don't. Yeah, no, it's fine. It's just the funny thing is that this is reminding me of the other rogue card that is almost there that also has a bonded enemy, which is the Crystallizer.
Oh, Crystallizer.
Which is just always living in the shadow of the Lucky Cigarette case. And the fact that like Bianca is now establishing this pattern that rogue cards that summon enemies are just always living in the shadow of a different card. It's kind of funny to me. But like, the thing is that I don't know if I want her to be better. I think the only thing I could think of is making the number of uses higher, and I think that's just like, or like adding more resources, and I think that's just kind of a dangerous game because it's just power creeping at that point. We've just finished talking about all the secret cards. I think both of us will agree that it's okay for not every card to be pushing the power level of the game higher. Yeah. I think this card is fine, and as somebody who does dabble in limited card pools on occasion, I think this card is great if you don't have Gregory Guy in your card pool. Like, it's a lot of money. 2 cost, and even if you have to spend 3 actions to get all the money out of it, as in you play it, you get money. That's still like a reasonable amount of economy versus tempo you're spending. If you're in rogue, you might have extra actions. And there was one more thing. Hit and run. Is this a hit and run card? I don't think so, because she exhausts, really. Which is the same. Well, I mean, if you know you're passing the test, right? If you have a high enough agility, you hit and run this for 5 resources, and then you have a 2 health, 1 sanity soak for a turn. I don't hate it.
That's actually. To be honest, that's more of like we'd be talking about hit and run itself. Like personally, I'm not a big fan of hit and run because of the card slots it requires. Like you gotta like combo things together. But that's a whole nother. That was from like months ago when we discussed hit and run. One thing I will say about Bianca though is that as an action-intensive resource generator, she kind of conflicts with Bank Job later in the set. Like they kind of fulfill similar roles in that you spend extra actions with 1 card slot to like get more than 3 resources. Or more than 5 resources. Oh yeah, that's another problem with Bianca is that Faustian Bargain exists, as like a resource generator.
Yeah, but I don't like Faustian in most, or like I've stopped playing Faustian in all my rogue access docs mostly because it's a bit too good, and also curse tokens are actually a little annoying sometimes. So yeah. Actually, but that does remind me. when you start talking about an action-intensive resource generator, that there's actually another ally that has an action ability on it to generate your resources. Do you remember his name?
Dario LMN, because you know what? I might be the only person in the universe who actually plays that guy.
You are absolutely not, because he's, well, I don't know if he's still in the deck, because I think at this point we've earned enough XP that he is unfortunately no longer made the cut, but he was definitely, I think, in the level 0 at some point. I unironically think that Dario is a good card. It's a better card in might be a better card in Alessandra than Bianca is, because the 2 stat boost that he gives is actually like super
Yeah,
relevant
actually, like
for
really good.
Yeah, because she already has 3 willpower and 4 intellect, so that goes to 4 and 5.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, that action ability is a little awkward, but on the other hand, like, Alessandra has a lot of control over where enemies are on the map. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's like, again, that is a completely offside, because you're not playing Dario for the econ ability, you're playing him for the stat boost. The econ
For the
ability is a nice
stat
bonus.
boosts. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I just want to point out, like, I think the point that I'm getting to is Rogue has a lot of different allies that all do very powerful things, and the fact that I think both of us are maybe a little lower in Bianca is not because we think that the card itself is bad, but because the field's so stacked, right? I think
Yes.
Bianca actually doesn't need to be any stronger. It's just that the field she's coming into is really strong.
Yeah,
Uh,
for what they do. But there is
yeah.
the one thing she does have going for it is that if you do want to somehow take advantage of summoning an enemy onto the board, the other allies don't really do that. So if you could gain some resources and summon an enemy onto the board, for exploitation, then Bianca's your gal.
I have played Alessandro solo, and the deck I was playing did include Bianca. And I did like her as an outlet for parlay actions if you draw her early. I found Alessandra's pretty resource intensive, so the resource generation that she provides is helpful. As a solo player, I'm not crazy about the enemy, and while I know there are lots of ways that you can, if you do piss off Bianca and get the enemy version, there are lots of ways you can control her and turn that to an advantage, but I find that's a little too combo-y for me.
Okay.
There's just too many moving parts to make that actually work, especially given that Bianca's limit 1 per deck, and there is a chance
that is an issue.
that
Yeah.
you may not see her during a game. So if you have all these other cards in your deck that are specifically designed to deal with Bianca, and Bianca doesn't show up, well, then you're kind of hamstringing yourself. Now, I am one of those players who did draw an auto fail while parlaying with her, and it nearly cost me the game because I was playing Shattered Aeons. I already had like 4 enemies on the table, and at that point, Bianca is very unwelcome, and I did have to kill her because there were just too many enemies, and so having an extra enemy in your deck when you're playing solo is not ideal. And I already had a Silver Twilight Acolyte in my deck as a basic weakness, so I had another enemy in my deck, which
Yeah.
So when I had Bianca on the table, I felt like Alessandra played better. Like I had an outlet for those extra parlay actions. I was able to get some resources. Of course, with fine clothes, if you're, not being very aggressive with her, you can get the resources basically for that free action. But man, oh man, when you're playing solo, and especially if you've got basic weaknesses that are enemies, it's almost not a risk I want to take.
Yeah, so I think in the end I see Bianca as like either like a third copy of Gregory Guy or like a third copy of Kicking the Hornet's Nest, depending on what you need. That's where I'm kind of landing on this.
How would we rate her?
I have a 0 in mind, mostly because I just like, she's not a +1. She's also not an Elder Thing to me. Like, it's closer to Elder Thing than +1 for me, but it's also, again, like Matt just said, like, it's not, the card is versatile. It fills lots of different roles, but I don't necessarily know if I want all those roles filled by the same card. And it's just like, yeah, the card's just fine, right? It's just fine. 0 is fine.
I think I'm gonna go with Elder Thing because I feel like unless you're doing something like really specific, you're just gonna pass over her. Because like you got especially since Bank Job is in the same set. So it's like if you just need resources and you're willing to spend actions to get them, just play Bank Job. So I think between Bank Job and between Bank Job, Gregory Gry, and like enemy weaknesses, Bianca gets another thing for me.
I think I'm going to land on 0. I don't think I can go any higher because she can blow up in your face at very inopportune times, which certainly happened to me. And I was, it was one of those games where I hadn't actually seen any of my other resource generation. And so I was down on resources. And then suddenly Bianca turns on me, and it's nice that you do get the resources even if she gets mad at you. But then I was like, I had been sort of counting on having all of the resources on her, and I think she still had quite a few on her left. And so suddenly I'm like, okay, well now I've got an enemy and I'm not getting the resources I need, and I don't have a lot of solutions in my hand that don't cost less than 3 resources. So there was got pretty dangerous there for a while. So I think 0 is appropriate for her. I don't regret putting her in my deck and playing her at all. And it's nice that she does have health and sanity, that if you do happen to snag all the resources, you can sack her to something else and away you go. And especially I think it's when I was playing Shattered Aeons, that you can end up sort of, I think the first one targets the first part of the scenario targets your sanity, and the second part targets your health. So it worked out. So the next card we're going to talk about is Blackmail File. It's a 2-cost asset with a willpower skill icon, item, tome, and illicit trait. As an action, choose a non-elite enemy at your location and parlay. Test X willpower, where X is that enemy's printed health value. If you succeed, that enemy disengages from each investigator and gains aloof until the end of the round. Thoughts on Blackmail File?
Why does this card exist?
I was about to say the same thing. This feels like really bad.
Like, I didn't expect. Okay, this card is not as bad as Pre-Taboo Scroll of Secrets, but actually, no, it might be worse. Actually, it might be worse. So here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
In any rogue, I'm fairly confident that in any rogue, your agility will be equal to or higher than your willpower.
Than your willpower? Yeah.
So
okay.
Why are you not just evading them? Parlay has support as opposed to evasion, but not so much support that I think it's worth including this card in your deck, taking up a valuable deck slot, playing this for 2 cost, and then starting to activate this ability, which it disengages, gains aloof, so you're not attacking it unless you're then re-engaging it and thus disregarding the whole reason for playing the card in the first place. Printed health value is often not going to be that much lower than your opponent's evasion, so like it's not like it's making a much easier test. Even with fine close, test is probably not going to be that much easier. And so I'm like, when this card was previewed fairly early on in the previous season, I have had some of the best, or I've seen some of the best minds in the game theorycraft with this card. And I think the best result that we've come up with is use it as a proxy for some other better cards. Because let's be honest, even like edge case, like I'm looking at the Arkham DB page, and there's like an edge case Leo Anderson sniper deck where you can like use his willpower because he's got agility 1 and he takes rogue access, and then he has the sniper rifle that you can't use on enemies engaged with you, but you can hit other locations and you can target aloof enemies, I think, with the scope and stuff. And I mean, I see math looking like this is a real deck. Don't get me wrong. The Leo sniper deck is pretty good, but you just play Blur, because Blur is really good in this slot and Blackmail File is not. And once you start doing the whole sniper thing, you have the XP to put in a copy of Blur. Or you put in Cat Burglar, right? Like, if you desperately want to get away from enemies, just play Cat Burglar. I think we just talked about how good Rogue Allies are. Cat Burglar is not one of the better ones, but it's better than this card.
It's underrated. Cat Burglar is very underrated.
I disagree with you on that specific take.
Okay.
I think we both agree that it's better than this card. The literal only reason that I think this card will ever make the table is because it is a slotless tome asset for Parallel Daisy, and that is literally it. And even then, I think OG Daisy front, Parallel Daisy back is just better. So, case closed. I don't know what you do with this card. I legitimately do not envision a deck that doesn't just want to like. Yeah, so if I'm playing or I'm setting up my Arkham game and I trip and Blackmail File falls into my table and I'm like, heck with it, I'll play with it for one game, I think you'll end up finding situations where this card might be useful. Like, I could see situations where this card is better than a basic evade, but those situations will be so rare and so inconsequential that it's not worth putting this card into your deck. I think that's the biggest problem. The problem isn't that like the effect is completely unusable. It's just that why does this card cost 2? Why does it cost an action to play? Why? And who wants
an action?
why? What rogue wants this? Even Alessandra, the parlay rogue. Well, for starters, her basic ability, her signature, which she gets 3 copies of, is a way better version of this already. And she gets higher agility anyway, and like Rogue is full of agility boosters. So yeah, no.
So what I think happened here, and I think there's like a bunch of cards that suffer from this problem. I feel like this is another one of those cards that was designed entirely around its flavor and not around its functionality. It's like, okay, I want to have a Blackmail File. Okay, that means it has to be intellect or willpower. Okay. It can't actually evade them. I want to make them cry in a corner like the art. Okay, how do I make them cry in a corner like the art? You see where this is going? I feel like this was designed for flavor and not actually for function, and as a result, it kind of fails.
I disagree. Yeah. I think the mechanical impetus for this card is actually there, and it's the idea that, like we actually mentioned with Bianca, sometimes you want an enemy around. I think Rogue has really become a faction that has, you occasionally want an enemy around.
Sure.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that with some of the other cards. But the idea here is kind of neat, where you can evade an enemy, you can pseudo evade an enemy, and it's not going to hurt you. It does actually work until the end of the round, not just against the end of the phase, which I believe is it stealth. Is it stealth that I'm thinking of? Stealth, because the thing is, this feels like a stealth, like another take on stealth. Yeah, and stealth is notably until the end of the turn, so stealth is a lot more limited in that sense. This is because that's what I was kind of getting at, is like, this does, in effect, evade the enemy for all the things you want an evasion to do, and it doesn't kill the enemy, which is, if we want enemies to stay alive, because we have effects that trigger off them, then this is good. The problem is that we have one of those already, and it's called the basic evade action, and it's something that is way more supported in Rogue, and way easier to pull off. And works on elite enemies, which is also kind of nice, because this doesn't work on elites. If you want to make enemies aloof, there's Existential Riddle, which is my preview card for Scarlet Keys, right, which is super cool, and everybody should play it. If you literally a parlay to make an enemy aloof, and the difference there is that it just stays aloof forever, right? You don't have to do this every single turn of the game. If you want to have enemies evaded if you want to play an asset that evades an enemy for a bunch of time, play Disguise. Right? Like, there are just so many better cards in the card pool. If you want to do what this card... Like, if you want the strategy that this card is trying to support, but do it in a reasonable way, there are so many better cards.
Yeah, it's kind of true. It's very niche, and also one thing I note is it doesn't prevent hunters from hunting, so...
No, but I think that is supposed to be an upside, not a downside. Because you can move to a location and have the enemy follow you without having to spend actions making it move.
But I think when it comes down to it, honestly, like when I was doing my big write-up on Alessandra, is that if you find a parlay card that's just like not up to snuff with Beguile, then it's garbage, because you get 3 copies of Beguile, and it's like, not only that, but you're gonna like use Friends in Low Places to search out your Beguiles and stuff, because Beguile is like actually one of the like. It's like actually super good.
Beguile is actually kind of bad, but
Ooh, I'm interested.
Saucy. That was not entirely an opinion that I actually stand behind. I think let me put it a different way. You can totally play an Alessandra deck that doesn't lean on Beguile and still be very good. I don't think
Interesting.
Bagal is the end all be all of Alessandra strategies.
Oh.
You don't have to go to these kinds of parlays in order to make her good. She's just like the thing. I think the magic trick is Alessandra gets one free parlay per round, and I think the expansion offers a lot of like a ton of different ways to parlay. But the reality is that
One.
if you have 4 different parlay abilities on your
Yep.
board, you're only getting one of them for free. You're gonna spend your regular actions on the other 3. That is not like that does not justify making them all parlays.
Exactly, and also there's the issue of some of your parlays, in fact quite a few of your parlay options are assets that you get to use over and over. So like all you need is one of them on the board, like a single Beguile, and all of a sudden that your Alessandra action is there's your budget right there.
Yeah.
So it's like you have traffic in your parlay options. So what that means is that if you're already facing traffic, you already have like superior ones, then Blackmail File is just like kind of falls out of the equation. Just,
Implies it was there in the first place, but yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's there
Right.
to proxy for something else. Yeah.
I think we've ragged on this card enough. Manfromleng, you got anything to add?
Having played Alessandra, this card didn't make the cut, and reading it over again, I don't think it will, simply because why am I dealing with enemies with my willpower when I have perfectly good agility and various other cards, especially Beguile and whatever, just to deal with enemies. I've never been a big fan of cards like Stealth that sort of just push the enemy down the road for a turn in solo, because you've basically used an action to kick the can down the road for a turn, and then you're going to have to do it again the next turn until you either kill it or finish the scenario. And
Yeah, and when talking about solo, like cards like Disguise who evade an enemy for 2 turns or slip away or whatever, those can still, help because you're spending, you are kicking the can down the road, but you're giving it a good old kick and it's not coming back for an extra turn. So you got some time to maybe get some distance. This is just like, it's not a problem this turn, but it will be a problem against next turn. And so, yeah.
So this doesn't inspire a lot of confidence from me, and the fact that it doesn't really make the cut in many Alessandra decks, and she's the parlay investigator, it's not going to make the cut in non-parlay decks. So ratings,
Autofill.
yeah, I think autofill is where this one lands. I mean, again, of course you've got fine clothes, but still rogues are not known for their willpower. And Alessandra is doing better than most in that regard, but still, she has 4 agility, and there are tons of better options. And in terms of using her parlay action, I mean, I find when I've been playing her, at the beginning of the game, it can be kind of hard to use, but then by mid to late game, you have so many options to use that 4th action that this one just isn't gonna be one of them.
Repeatable options. Like it's not just a bunch of events.
You've got multiple ways of, especially if you end up with multiple enemies on the table and you're sort of trying to juggle them and keep all the plates spinning. Using this parlay action is not going to be one of your priorities. So the next card we're going to talk about is British Bulldog. It's a 3-cost asset with a combat and agility skill icon, item, weapon, firearm, and illicit trait. Uses 3 ammo. As an action, spend 1 ammo. Fight, you may use agility instead of combat for this attack. This attack deals +1 damage. As a response, after you fail a skill test while parlaying with an enemy, put British Bulldog into play from your hand, and it takes up an hand slot. Thoughts on the Bulldog?
No thoughts, Veronica? All right. Well, I'm not a big fan of this.
I would like you to go first. I want to hear what you think.
So
before,
I admit I'm really not a big fan of the Bulldog, to be honest, because for several reasons. One is that as a weapon, we can compare it to the Derringer, which I kind of like. It's kind of like on par with the Derringer, if now that I look at it, because it always deals 2 damage. It has 3 ammo and it costs 3. So I guess the key thing is, the reason why you would play the Bulldog over like the Derringer is that you have a high agility and a low combat. Now, one thing to note about Alessandra is even Alessandra's, like where this came in, it's like that's only like a 2 difference, so it's not that big of a deal. So you're already like this is already being confined to investigators like Trish or Alessandra who have like very different, very different combat and agility scores. But then like okay, so you take that right, and then you say okay, all it does is it deals +1 damage. That is it. It has 3 shots. It costs 3, and so, like, at that point, it's basically a Derringer, but for certain investigators, and you don't have the succeed by 2 problem. So, I mean, there is that. Okay, so then you have the issue of, all right, the reason why you even want to consider the Bulldog in the first place is because you can drop it into play from your hand after you fail a skill test while parlaying with an enemy. And I'm gonna be honest here. I feel like this is the trap. It's like it's one of those things where it's because it exists. Oh, if I fail a skill test while parlaying with an enemy, I get to drop this thing into play from my hand. I'm gonna build my deck around doing that. Whee! No, don't do that. Just play backstab instead, and and then you're probably better off. So I don't really like this card, except as like maybe an alternative to at level 0 to the Derringer. How I feel.
Interesting, because my first take is that this is a power cup Derringer for people who have
Oh yeah.
because
Yeah, for people
the important thing is, I mean, you say it's the trap, and I don't entirely disagree with
the pot on the bottom. I feel like is the trap.
no
Yeah.
no I mean sorry yes, but what I was going to say is that to me the reason to run this card, because keep in mind when you put it into play you don't have to pay for it, you get it for free.
True. That's
So
true. Yeah.
this is why you would want a card like this, is because it's a Derringer that you don't have to pay for. You get to steal it. And in that sense, I am a little. I mean, conflict is maybe the wrong word, but like that is, I think, where this card really like sets itself apart from the existing options. Not necessarily being stronger than something like the Derringer, but being free. And I don't know. I have conflicting feelings about that, because obviously, like I don't like cards being free. I think that's a dangerous space to be playing in. But on the other hand, like this card is kind of shit. Like this card is not like
You have to engineer a failure too, which is like.
well, that's the thing. I don't know if you have to engineer a failure. As long as you have
The trap is engineering a failure.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that part. Do not build your deck around trying to fill. Like that's the thing. If you are putting the previous card, the Blackmail File, into your deck because it has a willpower test and you have a low willpower as a rogue, so you can fail a test, so you can then put this into play. Go, give me your cards. You haven't earned them. You will take your backsteps and like them. That being said, if this card is a okay weapon, because it doesn't exhaust, right? Like it's not like the monster. It is literally just like a +1 weapon that also happens to use agility, and that is, I think, the part of me that like irks me the most about this card is like I thought that like guns just used combat, and we agreed that like agility was for like bows and stuff, and so I'm not entirely sure. Like it's not the thematic of the thing, but it's like it feels like it's breaking this like in-universe rule that was established, that like no, you fight with combat and your agility is for like special weapons. But like it's a perfectly fine card, and also I mean people like Trish definitely love this card, but also anybody who's boosting their agility but not their combat, they're gonna have a higher stat. But that's the thing, this also doesn't have a built-in stat boost. So even if you have a reasonable agility, this is going to struggle to hit some amount of the time.
Yeah, I feel like that's another thing you do bring up is the power creep towards single stat decks. Where like back in like first it was intellect does everything, damage, clues, tests, all that, and now we're starting in the past 2 sets. We're starting to see a power creep towards agility does everything.
I mean, I feel like that's been a rogue thing for ever.
Agility doing everything though.
I guess, to be fair, it's been a thing since Winifred, but yeah, it's definitely something that I can see.
Yeah, it makes
like I can see the concern.
But we're so far into the card pool now that these sorts of mistakes are bound to happen. I
don't know if that's a mistake. We can argue about that some other time, but like I don't know if that's a mistake, because I think like if you put this card into Winifred, it's not automatically like invalidating every combat option just because she gets a built-in +2, because this thing doesn't give you a bonus. And like I would still consider
no, I
Mauser in
understand.
Winifred, even though this card exists.
Yeah.
Mostly because, as you mentioned, this card does literally nothing other than just do +1 damage, and it's
Yeah.
like it's not that exciting.
So it's also in the Alessandra set, right? And it's also like, weren't we just talking about how Alessandra needs things on the board? So what are you doing damaging them?
No, I think that makes sense. Like you do have to kill the acolyte at some point, right?
Oh yeah, well you have other
It's not gonna
ways.
do
You have like, I mean, you're already playing backstab for Zamakona, so just
You
use
are
that.
not backstabbing an acolyte. I mean, if you're in solo, maybe you're backstabbing the acolyte. If you're playing multiplayer, you should probably avoid backstabbing the acolyte.
Oh
You
yeah,
should
if
ask
you're
your
playing
teammates.
multiplayer, let your friends do work. Yeah, let your friends deal with the enemies.
No, but
Yeah.
like I don't remember if this card is in the Alessandro deck that's going through Hemlock Vale right now, but like this card is perfectly serviceable as just like a no, you need to deal with a thing occasionally. Like that does happen, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes messes need to be put out of their misery, and this
All
card.
I'll say is my Hemlock Vale run, solo Alessandra, I made it through the whole thing, where my only damage was 2 backstabs.
Respect.
Whole campaign. I also resigned very quickly in a certain scenario, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I know the scenario you are talking about. Yeah.
So when I played Alessandra, typically when I'm testing a new investigator, I end up playing the level 0 version a lot. And so I play with all the level 0 cards and don't play with the experience cards. And with Alessandra, I took a different tact and played with all the XP cards and not many of the level 0 cards. So I played with the upgraded Bulldog and not this one. And that one gives you an extra +2 to your attack, which I quite liked. But I never triggered the response, which to me felt like I was paying for a card that I wasn't actually getting all the goodies for.
Yeah, I get that, but I also feel like that's again, that's a little bit of that trap mentality where it's like, yeah, is that bad?
No, I didn't feel like I was. It sort of felt like there was this extra text, and I agree, it could very much feel like a trap where there's this extra text that you feel obligated that you should be using in some way. And I think if you go out of your way to use it, that would be a mistake. To me, it's fine. I mean, the design space for guns at this point in the card pool is so narrow that
it's true.
There's very little they can do that is going to be new and exciting when it comes to guns. They sort of back themselves into a corner almost immediately with the machete, and then tried to fix that. And then since then, between the Guardian guns and then the Rogue guns.
No, I don't know if I agree, but I think they need to, like, the part of the card pool that they need to explore more is the Guardian side of that equation, not the Rogue side of that equation. There are lots of cool Guardian or card pool gun designs that are possible for Guardian. They don't need to print more cool guns for Rogue. They've got them already. Like, the Mauser is awesome.
Yeah, well, we just learned that Mike McGlenn's going to be in the next set, so the Rogue is going to get all the guns, right?
Yeah, your prediction of Mike McGlenn's in the next set is finally coming true.
I mean, everybody's in the next set, but that is an entirely different video. I can already hear the comments talking about how Gloria will be tabooed upon release. So let's move on. Actually, well, we should rate this card. Do we rate this card first, or we talk about the level up version first?
No, we'll rate this one first.
I'll say Elder Thing. You know what? Actually, no, hang on. I'm gonna append that. I'm gonna say it's basically just a Derringer that works in certain investigators. If you look at it like that and you ignore the stuff on the bottom, then it's like I guess it becomes a 0. If you're an investigator where your agility is at least 2 greater than your combat, then this kind of replaces Derringer for you. In fact, it's actually stronger than Derringer because you don't have the succeed by 2 stuff. So yeah, 0, because I think I made Derringer a 0 way back in the day.
I mean,
there you go.
I don't feel like obligated to hold you to a review that was probably ages ago. But also,
it also works as a 3rd or 4th copy of a Derringer.
Yeah.
Like if you really need like a level 0 rogue weapon, and you need a 3rd, 4th copies, because there are not very many good. There are not a whole lot of good options at level 0. I'm not a big fan of the Mauser, just saying. So British Bulldog it could be your 3rd.
You're allowed to be wrong.
Derringer.
I also hate the Mauser, but that's because I was, I think, one of those few people who actually tried to play the Winifred starter deck as constructed, which was the most painful experience of my Arkham Horror career, I think.
Did you spend the whole time being like, "Where's my copy of Watch This? I'm digging for Watch This. Where's Watch This?"
Or just manual dexterity. That's also a good one.
Just
Overpower,
anything
not
to
bad.
give me the icons to trigger the damn thing would have been.
The Winifred deck is like the lowest amount of cards you need to change from one of those starter decks to make it one of the best decks in the entire game. You just put in like 2 copies of Perception, 2 copies of Manual Dexterity, 2 copies of Overpower. You have one of the stronger, like one of the baseline stronger cards decks in the game. But if you do that, you are going to be so miserable. I'm a big Mauser fan, but I'm also currently playing Thin with it. So like, yeah, he loved that card. Just in general, like it's just a good card. No, I'm glad you went to a 0 because I'm going to give this a +1, and I was a little afraid that we were going to be very far apart in ratings. No, I'm still on +1 for this card. I just think that like consistent weapons don't come around that often, and this is like you could put a lot worse cards in your deck.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So yeah, it's like a generic gun. It's probably fine.
Yeah. Maybe +1 is. You know what? I'm gonna check my mind. Make it a 0. You're right. This card isn't +1. It's a 0. It's very nice of Wendy. She has a 4 agility and a 1 combat.
Yeah, that's just an alternate Derringer. Depending on your stat line.
I'm gonna go +1. I think. I don't know. I think in the investigators who have high agility, they're gonna like it. I certainly liked it in Alessandra. Not this version, the other version that we're going to talk about shortly, but it did do the job, and it does have text. If you are playing Alessandra and happen to fail a parlay, then hey, you get a free gun, which is in an investigator who can potentially have a lot of very expensive events to play. Free is free, so I'll take it. The upgraded British Bulldog is a 3-cost asset that costs 2 XP, combat and agility skill icon, item, weapon, firearm, and illicit trait, uses 3 ammo. Basically the same text, except fight, you may use agility instead of combat for this attack, and you get +2 skill value. This attack deals +1 damage, and you get to ignore the aloof keyword for this attack. So if you are in the Whipper Whirlpool, you can kill one of them, at least. And it has the same reaction, I believe. After you fail a skill test while parlaying an enemy, put it into play from your hand. Takes up a hand slot. Now this is the one I did play in Alessandra. I was playing it with sleight of hand, so I don't think I actually ever paid for this thing. And it actually turned out that I don't think I ever paid for it, because the times I needed it, or I needed to deal with enemies, I had too many enemies, and this wasn't gonna quite do the job. Which is unfortunate. But
there are 2 more nuances, or there's a couple more nuances that maybe worth bringing up. One of the things is that if you fail a skill test while parlaying with an enemy, you get to put this into play from your hand. That means you're not taking the play action, so you're not provoking an attack of opportunity. So there is actually a little bit more to just not just you don't have to pay for it, but you actually get to ignore the attack of opportunity, which actually, is one of the downsides of these parlay decks that we've been mentioning, where like they want enemies in play. Yeah, sometimes you want to deal with the enemy and you don't have the right tool for it, and taking damage in horror you don't have to take.
Events.
Yeah, but you have to draw those, and if you're failing all your tests, that's not great.
You have to draw the bulldog.
Yeah, but the bulldog can kill 3 acolytes. Your backstab only kills 1. I actually wish it's got 1 more ammo. I have this feeling about a lot of cards that guns that upgrade into XP, or like stuff that upgrades where when they get 1 more bullet versus when they don't. It's just like such a big difference. Spending this for 3 ammo, it's just like I really wish.
Yeah, but the problem is, but then it's like total. Then it would be like definitely power corrupt over the Derringer if it got an extra ammo, because the Derringer level 2 is 3 for 3.
Yeah, but the
Yeah.
Derringer level 3 gives you, or level 2 gives you extra action.
Extra
So
actions. That's right.
don't try to read from the old tomes. I was there when it was written. I know what the upgraded Derringer does, and that one gives. This thing doesn't give you extra actions. This thing, the only thing that it does is kill enemies. I mean, it does kill aloof enemies. If you are have somehow ended up in this video and you haven't taken the Blackmail File out of your deck yet, then no, do not combo this with the Blackmail File. Yes, you can
No
make the
matter.
enemy aloof and then shoot it with the British Bulldog, but we are not doing this.
Oh, the combo's gonna get the combo gets even better, doesn't it? Or did we already talk about the false surrender? Oh no, false
No.
surrender is a rogue card. Oh my god! It's like someone designed this whole crazy combo.
No, they didn't. No, they didn't. Anyway,
Anyway.
I'm always a little more bullish on XP cards just because like the cost of including them isn't. It's also like future deck slot space, right? Once I've spent XP on a card, I usually am loath to replace it with a different XP card, and so if I'm putting this in, then I'm not maybe buying the upgraded backstab or something like that. And I think in that light, this card actually like falls off a bit more. I'd rather keep the level 0 in and put a different card in that gives me like I'd rather put in
Oh.
Moxie. What's the card that Momentum, the skill card? Like I would rather put in something that just boosts my stat. High roller, moment. Like you have these ways of boosting stats, and
All
ignore
this does is really boost the stat and ignore aloof. It's not doing additional
and
damage.
ignore aloof
Even over
is
the long.
such flavor text.
Yeah, it's very. Yeah,
Like,
it's rare. It's rare and situational. Yeah.
The thing is that like ignoring aloof is very critical on dirty fighting. It is not that relevant here. Because if I and the thing is, if I'm giving this enemy aloof, then I already have dealt with it in theory, unless I'm using the Blackmail File. But as we have previously established, we are not using the Blackmail File. So yeah,
Plus, there's also a flavor fail here, like a flavor problem here. Okay, so let's you ignore aloof, right? All right, so what is the flavor of aloof enemies? It's an enemies you like can't reach, right? You can't see them because you can't point your gun at them, right? You can't point your gun at them because they're aloof, so they're off in the distance somewhere. What is it about the British Bulldog in that it shoots heat-sinking bullets that like manage to go all the way into other dimensions and across time and space and strike the aloof enemy that you can't even physically see, in the head?
I don't think that the whippoorwills are. That's just that they're a bunch of birds that fly away from you if you try to hit them with a machete. Like they're not that far away, okay?
Yeah, but
And
you
like
can't shoot them either. You can't shoot the whippoorwills.
if we were redesigning Arkham Horror Second Edition, which we are not, but if we were, I would probably redesign so that melee like needed to be
Oh, melee
engaged
and
guns
range
would
actually means something.
something, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean the thing is like yeah, this the aloof keyword. We're ignoring aloof on this. It's just text that they added because I mean it probably will come up if you put this card in your deck, but it's just like one of those things where like that's not why you're putting this card in your deck.
So this one I feel like it just doesn't make the cut because all you're doing is spending XP on like the +2. To be honest, like that's all you're really doing. And at that point, why?
Well, because +2 stat boost is actually like not irrelevant.
Yeah, but you can use that XP on other things that also add to like all your agility tests, for example. Like I don't know. I like Moxie, for example. Just run Moxie.
Ratings?
Oh yeah. Elder thing. No, it's not a tentacle. It's not a tentacle.
It is to me. It is to me.
Blackmail File. Again, if you trip and fall and the Blackmail File ends up on the table, you might end up with a card that does something occasionally. This card will kill, like, it will kill at least one. I guess this is something that I wanted to say that I didn't say, is as you start earning XP, the enemy health values tend to get bigger as well. So the reason why I wanted this to have one more ammo is because the level 0 is probably going to kill 3 enemies in a scenario. The thing is that like by the time that I have the level 2 in my deck, this might only kill 1 or 2 enemies, and like, or probably 2, but like it's already struggling probably to get 3 kills out of it. If it had 1 more ammo, I'd be a little bit more like, okay, I can kill 2-3 health enemies, I can kill a 4 health enemy and still have a bullet left over. Like, so no, I mean, I think the card's perfectly fine, and again, like, there's a lot to be said for things to be free and also not provoking tax opportunity. So I think calling this a out of fail is wrong, but I think it's just an Elder thing because like if you have the level 0, it's already doing most of what you want this card to do.
No, stick it with it. Stick it with the tentacle. Play other cards. Play other rogue cards.
That's fair.
Yeah, play. I don't know.
Do
Manual
not
dexterity
play.
level 2.
Do not play Blackmail File though.
No, well, we've already established.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So Matt, you went Tentacle. Veronica, you went Elder Thing.
Thing.
I'm gonna go 0.
Ooh.
I've played with this.
We are all over the place.
I liked it.
Okay.
I do sort of dock at a point just because of you are spending 2 XP and you're not getting the bonus damage, but I found the extra skill value to be very handy, and playing it with sleight of hand, it worked out pretty well for me. I mean, the aloof part, I don't think that ever was relevant, ever. So, and again, I never triggered the response. So there might be better ways to spend 2 experience points. And I know when I was looking at the Alessandro deck I've been playing, that was one of the things I was trying to cut back on, was like trying to shave experience points out of it because it was already pretty high.
Yes,
and
infamously
it was
high
at
XP.
like,
Yeah.
I think I was playing like the 29 XP version, and you know, when you're playing solo and you're dealing with three basic weaknesses plus your regular weakness, it gets to be a lot. Yeah, maybe I'll go back and the British Bulldog won't make the cut in a future iteration, but the one I've been playing it in, it's been okay. That's going to do it for part 1 of our look at the rogue cards in the Feast of Hemlock Vale Investigator expansion. Let us know in the comments down below what you think. Any final thoughts on this group?
Kind of a lackluster group.
The real value is in the events. I'll agree with you on that. The best is yet to come.
The best
But
is yet to
as a proper rogue, we've kept some tricks up our sleeves. So keep watching.
I don't know. I don't feel as down on these cards as you seem to feel. I played them. They worked well.
Yeah.
They did the job. Like, I was never sad, which you know, I can't say about some cards in this set where it's like you draw it and you're like, oh, this
Were those
sucks.
cards by chance blue? Just asking for friends.
Well, I haven't played. I think I've only played a couple games with Wilson, and the one game I did play, I botched it so badly that it was one of those that you just put an X beside it and move on. So
Move on with your life. All right.